Rosen. I'm from Geek Industries. I'm here to network and collaborate and see what the startup scene like is in Cape Town.
My name is Tyrone. I'm from Raw Catering Company. We're supplying the catering here this evening for Startup Grind. Nice selection of platters. Nice to keep everyone full for the evening. Been part of the Workshop 17 in collaborating to provide food for the Startup Grind. And yeah, hope everyone enjoys. And as we like to say, Raw Catering Co. Feeding dreams.
Hi, my name is Robin McGregor. I'm from the Om Revolution Mobile Yoga and Wellness. We are based in Cape Town and we're here tonight hoping to network and see what other ideas, up and coming companies have that we can also, learn from.
Guys, can you please stand up on your feet? Give a massive, there we go, on your feet, there we go. Massive round of applause for David and Roger. Woo! All right, okay. So let's sit on our super comfy chairs. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for coming.
Do you want to load up our PowerPoint?
Eh? No, it's not even, okay. Yeah, all right. Luckily they can see over there, you can see there, it's all good. Okay, so we always started with where you guys were born and what you guys have done, but there's so much content that I'm just going to zoom through everything quickly and go, Roger was born in Cape Town, David was born in Joburg, Durban, Cape Town. He was born in Durban, he moved to Joburg, and now he lives in Cape Town.
Kind of.
Yeah, something like that. So, but the cool part is that they are now in Cape Town, and they're really helping the Cape Town startup scene by doing some really cool things. So, Roger, you started off in Cape Town. You were actually head boy, which was pretty cool. And then you got into yachting. You studied, got into yachting. Tell us that story.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
I kind of stumbled into yachting. I grew up in Somerset West, studied at UCT for 2 years doing engineering. And after 2 years, realized that I didn't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. So I decided to take a gap year. In the gap year, sailed the Cape to Rio race. From Rio, ended up in the Caribbean. And after a month of staying on board, found out that verbal contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on, and had an argument with the skipper. Moved into a house and slept on a couch with a friend of mine for a couple of months, and was completely flat broke, and kind of didn't have anything. We were running out of money, didn't have money for food, so I used to walk the docks in the morning and go ask at every boat, like, do you have work, do you have work? And I'd normally work about 1 out of every 7 days, and when you didn't get work, I'd take my book and a sarong and a bottle of rum and go sit on the beach and realize that being broke isn't so bad. And so it really gives you a good perspective of, like, what not having anything actually is and what it is like to lose it. And that's been interesting. And I kind of, from there, I stumbled into my first job as a deckhand and ended up being offered a chief engineer's position and worked on super yachts for about 4 years as a chief engineer on big luxury yachts before coming back. So
That's crazy.
Stumbled into it completely arbitrary.
And your story is a bit more different because you actually started the business when you were at school.
Yeah.
Tell us about that business.
So you do lots of stupid things when you're at school. I had made a lot of money working in internet stuff, just selling my time, and so I had some cash, and I met a guy at work, and we decided to start an internet business. Back then, that just meant writing HTML, buying a server, and I worked at a service provider, so we just plugged it in. So 12,500 rand cash. I thought, no, buy it in cash, feel real, bought a server with cash, which was a lot of money for a 16-year-old kid. And I'll never forget the day when we had a few customers, things were going well, and something was wrong. Like, I couldn't get a ping response, so I went into the office, checked what was happening, tried to call my co-founder, like nothing, no response. And I walked into the NOC, the Network Operations Center, and I just saw the cable lying on the floor. The guy had come and taken the hardware and disappeared, and soon afterwards I found out the cops were after him. He had gambling debts, and I'd never saw him again. So quite quickly I learned that it might be a good idea to know something about your co-founder, get something on paper. I had nothing on paper. I just bought a server in cash which had disappeared. So quick lessons in startups.
About that, we should chat.
That's crazy. Okay, so you studied a hectic engineering course. I read there signal processing arrays. Doing engineering myself, I immediately closed this off because you do not want to get involved with this. But then you got into coding. And tell us about the MK Airlines.
Cool.
What
So
you did there.
yeah, the whole engineering thing was actually just to figure out how a chip worked, because you could do all the software, but I didn't actually know how the things went inside, and I wanted to figure that out. And then coming out of that, I could do software, and I got engineering, and I couldn't work anywhere. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because people were doing software wrong. So MK Airlines was actually a family business. So my uncle had started that, and he was a successful entrepreneur. So I knew I wanted to start a business to do software right, but I knew nothing about starting a business, having epically failed. So I said to him, can I come and learn a thing or two about business? And essentially he interned me around his business until one day I said, look, I'm here, the department, I'm spending all my time copying things out of a red book into Excel and giving them, like presenting them at the monthly board meetings, and you guys think this is valuable, but what you need is software. And he took me aside, he said, Chum, you need to pitch this to the board. I went to the board, and they use this word, chum, in the UK. It's a really British thing. And I said, Chum, listen, if we do it internally, all respect to you, it'll never finish. This is the truth of software. And they said, if we do it outsourced, it'll be too expensive, we'll never get it done. So I said, give us £5,000, and I'll head to Cape Town and get it done. And so that's how I started my business, out of there. It was actually out of frustration at not being able to build software in a corporate.
That's crazy. Is that how you started information logistics?
Yeah.
So that's been going since then, which was what year was
2004.
that? 2004.
Yeah.
And it's still going today. But now at the moment you're busy running also Afrolabs.
Yeah, so Afrolabs actually acquired information logistics last year.
Oh, okay.
It reflects a bit of our change in strategy to focus on startups and helping startups win in particular. Yeah, information logistics, we worked for Mines and Microsoft and Nussbass and people with all due respect, I'm enjoying not working for anymore.
Startups are more fun. They're more cool.
It's where you don't need to remember the email address. You can't spell information logistics.
Yeah, exactly. Long way to go. Okay, so Roger, you don't do Playlogix. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I also kind of stumbled into that. So when I got back from yachts, I realized I didn't want to be in yachts for the rest of my life either. So luckily on yachts, you get paid in dollars, so it's quite easy to save some money. And I put a bit aside. I worked out what it would cost to go through a 4-year university degree. So I came back to Cape Town with enough money for a 4 years university degree, a little bit of living costs and that sort of thing, and then realized I've got to choose something to study. And so I looked around and kind of being relatively technical and into entrepreneurship and business, decided tech entrepreneurship would be a good thing. And I pretty quickly realized that you actually can't study that. And that the best thing to do would be to pay myself the money and take 2 years off. So I gave myself what I like to dub a real-world degree, where for 2 years I sort of covered my living expenses. The first year I worked in about 4 or 5 different companies by literally just going up to them and saying, hey, this is my situation, give me a cool project to do. And I did product market fit surveys and analytics, and I financed the guy importing vuvuzelas. We brought in 740,000 of them for the World Cup. Yeah, sorry. But I made some good cash if that balances it out. Yeah, and then the second year I came across the Silicon Cape initiative and thought, that's exactly what I need to kind of get in there. It's a community of entrepreneurs. It's a network. It's building that sort of thing. So I stuck my hand up and I ran that. I volunteered there for the first year, sort of paid my own salary and rebranded the website away from we rebranded to like the purple and grey instead away from this teal, if anyone remembers that from 2009. And yeah, so kind of ran that, got very involved in that for about a year. And when the money ran out, looked around my network and said, hey, I need a job. And got offered an operations manager job at Brandseye, which is a online brand tracking thing, a subsidiary of Quirk. And yeah, I worked there for about a year, and then when I realized there wasn't equity on the table, I kind of stumbled along, and so I moved through a couple of different businesses as we were doing things, and then about 3.5 years ago, Playlogix was just sort of splitting for Gift, that they were relocating over to the US, and the founder of Playlogix, Mark, moved over CTO of Gift, so he sort of said, well, I've got a handful of developers and a couple of projects. Why don't you pick it up and run with it? So it's been about 3.5 years of taking that and trying to shape that and to try and work out how do you build how do you build a sustainable business building technology for startups? And that's been an interesting lesson and a long one. But yeah, and that's really where Playlogix is now, is building tech for startups and helping them work out what they need to build.
So you help build startups, and you now also help build startups. So how did you guys, going through your paths, developing for these people, come up to where you guys are basically direct competitors, but you're working together?
So it wasn't the first person who tried to introduce us that we listened to. And people kept saying, there's this guy who does these things. And I assumed he was like some old, annoying guy running a similar business model.
Instead of a young, annoying guy.
Yeah. And eventually I got a message from Roger, and he said, wow, we should meet. I was like, okay. And when we met up, we were wearing the same pair of shoes.
Yeah. We compared business models and sort of, we do things like this. They're like, oh, we do exactly that, but like this. And it's like, oh, we do this. Oh, we do exactly that, but like that. And there was an awkward similarity in how we were approaching business and how we were solving this. And
really awkward, like same cash flow problems, same number of employees.
Yeah,
this is heart-rending. This is beautiful, guys.
So one of the reasons why we started collaborating is there isn't a shortage of entrepreneurs. There isn't a shortage of businesses. There's more than enough deal flow out there fulfilling what we do. The hard part is finding qualified deal flow. And at the time we were 6 or 7 people. Yep. You were about 7 or 8 as well. So we're both these small businesses, and you have a huge feast and famine issue. And by actually collaborating, and we now share pipeline, we're still competitors, but it just makes more sense for us to collaborate and work together and build it together. And so we've started doing a lot of other initiatives as well. From just seeing like what's missing, what do we think we can fulfill in that. So yeah, we run a Wednesday morning coffee, Lean Startup Coffee, and then we started, and part of looking at the notes and the process that we're running through, what was really awkward but really obvious as well is we both developed these, as David phrases it, the anti-sales process of telling entrepreneurs why you're not ready to build technology. And because
it's really hard for them to hear that. You have to really convince people why their idea does not need to be built.
Everyone comes in and says, I just need the next Facebook. Like, I just build me this technology. And people don't realize that, and one thing that a lot of people are missing is that the technology doesn't make the business. The business model needs to work regardless of the technology. The technology helps that scale, but getting the business model right is the hardest part.
The hardest part of that is finding the customer.
And the hardest with a customer with a problem. And so David and I both had these anti-sales process of telling, which doesn't really make sense when your core business is selling software, is to spend most of your days telling people why they shouldn't be building software.
Yeah, and really we had like a moment where we actually realized that. We were drawing the Venn diagrams on the board and being like, that tension sucks. So how do we get rid of that tension and have a thing that grows ecosystem and helps entrepreneurs through so that the sales function of these two things can actually work?
And the process that we overlapped was that anti-sales process that we'd both been working that is so similar. And that we kind of, David wrote out his process, I wrote out my process, we put them together, we cleaned them up wherever there was a disagreement or wherever there was a conflict or a difference, we hashed it out over rather animated discussions. But and that's kind of where we developed this process of the Lean Iterator, which is really how do you run from an idea to a product to a business, and what kind of thread of validation do you need to actually justify moving to the next step?
And is that how you came out with the Lean Iterator?
Yeah, in the true spirit of things, we didn't know what to call it in the beginning, and then Roger said, I like Lean, and then Lean Startups, and then Accelerator, and I had to argue till I was blue in the face why Accelerator was totally not what I wanted to be building, and why, because the synchronization is a waste. So we came up with this iterator, which is literally a way of helping startups pick the next step, Creative Commons to all our content. Just said, okay, well, while we're doing one, let's record it, let's put it up, because this is taking too much of our time. How can we do as little time as possible here to actually make this work? Because we needed to scale it.
So the first question is, what is a startup?
That's a good question, right?
Okay, so, well, the official, Steve Blank's official terminology is a startup is a temporary organization in search of a repeatable, scalable business model.
So to summarize that startup is search. Like, it can be building tech and all of these things, but really it's a search for a business model which has a customer, a problem, and a solution, and a way of scaling that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be inside a larger corporate, it could be in a company, it could be not. Everyone thinks startups is a small person running a sponsor shop as a startup, but they're not in search of a business model. The business model is known. They're just a small entrepreneur. There's nothing wrong with that. Small entrepreneurs become medium entrepreneurs. Medium businesses become large businesses. But a startup specifically is trying to do something unknown, trying to do something new, trying to do something innovative.
Which puts us to Eric's definition, which is around a group of people trying to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So, and Eric, if Eric's the father of the Lean startup, Steve Blank is the grandfather. He had customer development. And Eric saw that and made this unholy marriage of agile plus cloud plus customer development, and there we saw the Lean startup, which was really our inspiration. And the Lean Iterator is then just a path through that. The Lean startup is big and intimidating, and there's so many things I could do. What do I do next? We just try to help answer that question.
Okay, so now the question is, what is the Lean Iterator? In 60 seconds, what's your pitch? Go.
The Lean Iterator is a process to help entrepreneurs know what they need to do next, and to help guide them through of what they need to validate next in their business. The fundamental job of a startup is to reduce risk, and the reason you want to reduce risk is because that increases your valuation. So, but the only way to reduce risk is through validation. So identifying what is the biggest risk in your business, what is the next thing you need to validate, and helping entrepreneurs focus on that. Most people are focusing on building technology, hiring offices, and doing things, which are, we know we can do that stuff. It's working out if customers actually have that problem. Yeah. It's getting real data in the real world of that you can actually show that that's true.
So we can say lots of smart words about it, but really it's a way of getting past the intellectual brains of the really smart people that are creating startups and kicking them in the ass and getting them out the building. Because that's, Steve Blank gave us the phrase, get out the building, and the reason we got to get out the building is that's where your customers are. I still get worried when I have to make sales calls for a new startup. It's hard, it's difficult, but if we can get around doing that, that's really what we're doing. So all of these frameworks and things is just how do we get out of the building at the right time?
Yeah. And so the Lean Iterator is a collection of some international, some of the tools that David has developed around iteration design, but taking international tools and tools that we know can work, and lining up customer development with Lean Startup to help you through a validation process. So give you a set of tools and a guide of what you should be focusing on next.
So I can go to the leaniterator.com.
Yep.
And I can get all the resources I need right there, and I can follow those resources, and by that time, after that, I'll be able to know what my next step is.
So you can get the videos on Creative Commons there. The other resources that every startup needs and plays the violin about is funding. So we found that
there's never enough funding.
Well, it's debatable.
There's never enough
tons
validation.
Of funding and there's tons of startups, but the two don't always meet up.
Are you building a bridge between those two?
No. So I don't think we can build a bridge. It's not an easy thing. You'll never get a highway where you can cruise across.
It's never the same for everyone.
Yeah, it's more of like a platform game. If people who played Mario, please just like. So Mario did it, right? You start and you jump.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and then you die. That's how Mario goes. You start, you jump, and then you die. And the mushroom ate you, and then the rock ate you. And our goal is to teach people that you die, you get extra life, you try again, and how to play the game as an entrepreneur, and how to be the game as the community and the investors behind it. Because you finish level 1, right? You jump on the top of the flag, you never get to 1,000. It just doesn't happen. But then you go into the castle, and what happens? No, like fanfares and joy. That's a moment. The princess is another castle. Do. And now you get these fire bullets, and everything's harder, and it's dark, and maybe you keep the fire bullets for long enough to try to get through that damn stage. But it's harder, the burn rate is higher, but still you need to be build, measure, learning. How do you jump? How do you hit the coin, get the money out? How do you get past that stupid mushroom? And then, your reward for finishing that stage, depending on what era you were born in, is normally ending up underwater. The next stage, you're underwater trying to swim, and now the turtles can actually swim at your head, and there's fish trying to hurt you. So it just gets harder, but teaching people that it is a game, how to play the game, and entrepreneurs how to be the game, so that we can get people across these chasms over and over again.
And the collection of tools and actions that you need to overcome any one of those levels is very similar, and there's a lot of similarities in that. If you learn, and so the big goal of the Lean Iterator is to teach entrepreneurs to create learning organizations, so that as the levels get harder, as you get to the end and then you're moving into Series A and Series B and Series C, it starts getting harder and harder. But if you have the same tools in how can you learn and how can you learn faster and build solve your customer solutions better. And that's really what the Lean Iterator is about, is a collection of tools and processes.
And speaking about those stages also gives us our focus, like VC, ABC, all of that stuff, that's kind of handled to an extent. It's this pre-seed stage, the frothy, messy end of what the hell, how do I get 50,000 Rand, that we're trying to help people do.
So VC is you're getting more money, seed stage being very little money right in the beginning. You've just got an idea basically, and you need some funding to get somewhere.
How do you find 15 grand, 150 grand, your first 500,000 Rand? And the issue that most people don't realize is it's flipping expensive for investors to apply that money, because they're generally spending around 200,000 Rand to apply that money. So by trying to standardize some things in the ecosystem, we're trying to reduce that transaction cost for investment. And from the investor's point of view, it's kind of a great investment in a due diligence process to try to find things that are worth investing in.
So this brings me to the next thing. I believe there's a rumor that you guys are starting a fund.
It's not a fund.
It's a bad rumor. Funds have like this notion of a predictable return, or at least some money back in a certain way over time. It's more of a pool of money that we can pour at this due diligencing process.
So from our experience and out of the projects we've built, there's certain patterns of how much money you need and what you should be focusing on each time. And too much money at too early or too little money too late is very often what kills entrepreneurs. So in from the funding side and where our hypothesis lies is that ideation is around identifying a customer's problem and getting and validating that you have a potential solution for that. You shouldn't spend more than 15,000 Rand or 4 weeks on that. If you can get that right, you then move to the next level, which is exploration. Exploration is validating the business model and the size of the market. So justify, like selling it in some way or showing that there's real data that you can actually deliver on this. And
that's the stage where the whole fake it comes in. Like there's smoke and mirrors and duct tape and everything there to show that
MVPs and a whole bunch of.
If someone will give me money for it, they will be happy in the end.
And that's about 150,000 Rand and about 2 months. And typically that's a good level up from that. And with that money over that time, if you spend it intentionally, you can normally get enough validation to move to the next level, which is the creation stage. And that's where you actually build out the tech. You'll move from hack mode into engineering mode, where you're actually building some meaningful technology, raise some. And there, typically, the money is about 1.5 million Rand over a 6-month period for you to build it. And that changes per sector, and the numbers are a little vary. But from our experience, that's typically the $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 stage. And helping entrepreneurs know what you should be focusing on when you're in the $1,000 stage. What should you be focusing on in the $10,000 stage? And what should you be focusing on the $100,000 stage? And at the end of that, you should be able to move into what is typically a VC round in South Africa. Internationally, you can kind of divide by 10. But which is raising a 5 to 10 million round and moving on to the next phase. But it's really that process that we're looking at. And how do you do that in a scalable way that provides a bit of flexibility?
Would you, if you had a startup, now I've got a brilliant idea, I want to build my app now, I'm busy going through your Lean Iterator, would I outsource the dev work to somebody? Would I try and get a co-director or co-CT or...
You'd stop that conversation and not do the dev yet.
Yeah. Go find customers.
Like in the business.
But I can't find customers. I need to show them. They don't understand. They don't get my incredibly amazing concept.
Okay, so you need to go to leaniterator.com and watch the videos to convince you. That's why we did it, so we don't have to spend 6 hours here convincing you.
So there's about 6.5 hours of lectures or talks that we did for the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. All the content that we delivered for them is all available online. So that's the videos David keeps referring to.
Yeah.
There we unpack in quite great detail on why you should not do that. But the bottom line is that you're going to spend the money on the wrong things. You're going to build the wrong things right now. There's one of my favorite examples. He's actually in the room, so I won't mention him by name. But is a certain domestic worker marketplace, the green one, that we were involved in. And he, Berner came to me a little while, about 2 years ago, saying, we need to build this tech. And I said, no, you need to build a landing page. And he built a landing page on Wix and a Google form and with PayFast, big shout out, to get it up. And he did his first number of bookings from that. And he came back after 3 or 4 months with 70 bookings or 40 bookings and said, I need to go, now we're getting ready for December, we're going to do lots of bookings, I need to build some tech. And I said, no, you need to hire 3 people. So I introduced him to an angel investor, got a little bit of money and hired 4 people and they did 70 bookings in the month of December. And then
And that's the way to start.
And that's kind of how you start. Like, heck, and then when they came back from that, they'd got enough validation. He had actually raised some meaningful money, and then we came back and we built 6 platforms for him in 3 months. So we can build a tech. It's not the issue of but identifying what you should build. You only really know by delivering it and trying to deliver that for the customer's problem. And building tech too early is software is expensive. It's one of the most expensive things you're going to do. And trying to do that all right up front before you've validated your idea enough is just the wrong time to do it.
Yeah.
Can everybody see those screens? Okay, I'm going to unplug this thing. It's really irritating. Can you guys see this? Can you guys see this?
No, I don't need to.
No, I don't think anyone can see them now. G, you just unplugged everyone.
That is right. Okay.
Cool. You can just turn
At least
this
you
off.
got a techie up here.
You can just stand up and turn that off if you want.
This is why we need multiple signal classification using array beams.
Switch that.
Just turn it off.
Thank you, guys. Oh, Reynolds. Okay, sorry about that.
Cool.
It's quite dark out here. Okay, so where's the pen? All right.
So on tech not working, the thing is tech is expensive and tech never works, right? It doesn't work right the first time, and you can't rely on it working. So if you can build it without tech, it's a lot easier to change.
Yeah, and as soon as you codify something and write it out, it becomes quite rigid. When you're doing it manually, if you're concierging it or you're being the machine, you can change your pricing for every customer. You can change the email, the messaging you send. You can do things dynamically to learn what works and what doesn't. And the biggest thing the most important thing that a startup needs to do is a learning organization. You need to learn faster than somebody else. The whole concept around lean is not about spending less money. It's about focusing on learning and optimizing for learning, not optimizing for cost, or not optimizing for risk reduction. A corporate is designed to optimize for risk reduction at the highest cost.
Which is the right thing for them to do.
Which is the right thing for them
Lean
to do.
depends on which value stream you're looking
Yeah,
at.
the last
So
thing
for
I want...
us, we have a world that the value stream is build, measure, learn. That's the only value stream, and anything you can do to get through there faster is good. Anything that slows that down or isn't doing that is waste.
Yeah.
So not failing is waste. Failing is not waste in build, measure, learn.
And
But
if
you
you
look
can't-
at the other value stream, you're screwed.
Yeah, if you can't raise the money to build the tech that you need to build, it means that you haven't validated enough to actually justify building that tech. So it's like the market is telling you need more validation. Go out and find a way to remove the risks in your idea and your business in the market in what you're doing. And normally that means concierging it, delivering something, or getting real evidence from customers that it's important.
Yeah, and startups with little violins always come to us and say, well, can't you build the tech and then we can make it work? And
But they will come.
we have smaller pockets than the investors. If you can't encourage an investor who has 1,000x my money to put money behind it, then it would just be foolish for me to put money behind it because it's a much smaller bet for them. So what bet do you need to take on your cheapest imaginable failure as your next step is the thing. So sure, at some point it's worth building the tech, and at that point you'll have the money to build the tech. And if you're struggling with that, that's what we're trying to help with.
Finding devs in South Africa.
We're hiring.
And we rent them out. and we're growing them, right? So
Yeah.
like I run Coder Dojo teaching 7 to 17-year-olds. We've got a great new partnership coming up with SA Cape, who've got like 40 Kano computers, which teaches kids to code. We run code retreats to help grow the professional developers. Us and our devs do colloquia at UCT, teaching devs about being devs. But it's a tough thing. And then actually coming up soon, startup, you can shout the name. It's Timu, right? No? You're in the room? No? Anyway, they do education at sort of job creation stage, and we're going to try to be running some coding competitions with them using Code Academy and Code Combat. It's a game, and you go through that. So we're trying to grow more developers because it has to happen. But other than that, the devs are out there. Just ask Prodigy. They've managed to suck in a bunch of cool people. A lot of cool people went to work there, but it's all about getting your value proposition right. Get your risk reduction right. Devs are amongst the smartest people in our society. They'll go and find the right place to be working.
Yeah, one of my big goals for this year is to work out how can us as Playlogix build the capability to help get developers into the startup. So we're actually running an experiment now with a potential recruiter who will work with us and for us to either help fill our team or help out fill our team when a team moves into a startup, or to help recruit directly for startups. So all the only developers we've lost in the last 4 or 5 years have all been going to clients, and we actually encourage that because if the developer wants to go, it's in their interest, and it's in the client's interest to get the developer who wrote the initial code who understands their business model and the problem. So we're actually actively trying to help build those startups to act as a soft launching pad for that.
And I mean, in our contract, it's called the solicitation clause. Most have a non-solicitation. Ours is solicitation. And I'll get a founder coming to me saying, Dave, CEO X is flirting with me. Can't you remind him that he could just talk to you, and if I want to go work there, that would be great, but it doesn't have to happen below the radar. Because really, you never want to be trapped, and this freedom of movement is what helps. I've been the wrong side of a R1 million anti-poaching agreement, and the depressing part about that was I sat, after having this discussion, I won't name the name of the big M that we were at. It was one of the M's. There's a few, so you can guess. But he said, look, it's actually going to be worth it for us to pay that fee because that's how much the other guys are marking you up. And I went, wait, that's ridiculous. And I never want someone to be in that trap again. So I made sure we just avoid those practices as our businesses.
Yeah. And recruitment fees suck.
Yeah.
12%,
Okay, we got
12% for a senior developer is ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Or it's not. It depends on who you are.
If you get the right one, eh? Some questions. Do you have any questions from the audience? And then obviously we've got some questions on Slido that we'll be answering. So do you think it's a good qualified locally, worldwide? I actually answered that question, so thank you for that one. Are South Africa that one's gone. Are South Africa doomed to fail if they only focus on the relevantly small local online markets? Quite a good question.
Doom is a strong word. And when
are we doomed?
Look, we're doomed if you try to sell a first world solution into a country with the Gini coefficient that fucking looks like this. You're selling to that many people.
Yeah.
If you look at your market sizing and actually you're selling online, like Timbuktu is doing, they're trying to sell lower down the pyramid, then sure, give that a try. But if you're trying to sell something that seems like a good idea in the valley here, if you can make it work with those few million customers, mazel tov. If you can't make it work with those, but you're using it as an incubator to test your idea, that's also cool. Yeah. But the magic thing we have in South Africa is the ability to test things for the African context. And that's where the real changes come. That's where we really enjoyed Nominini and their success. So I tried to convince that CEO not to build that product because, so Nominini is a thing that you push a button and it prints airtime. Every geek knows that you can just type in something with USSD and get that airtime. Why the hell would you have something that prints airtime? And now they're in, 20 African countries, 1 million transactions a month was 2 years ago that they hit, printing out airtime because it's a solution that fits the context that we have. So finding those is magical, and investors who are investing into Africa are actually looking for those base of pyramid solutions. But the nice thing is we can go both directions from here, either upwards into the continent or using our first world problems to solve first world problems and go map those out to the world. And if you can make it work here, as everyone says, make it work
anyway.
Yoko seems to be doing okay.
Yeah.
SnapScan, Yoko, Ikubu, there's plenty of examples of companies that are making it work.
And many of those are not purely online. It's like bridging that online-offline thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially in South Africa. Yoko will be our speaker next month, so that's cool. Right now, there are some free tickets if you want to get it out. Okay. Do you think South Africa has a truly robust VC market?
So the South African ecosystem is really small and is really young. I think we can all be very honest about that. It's tiny, and that's the startups, it's the VCs, it's the everyone. Calm down. And so. Sorry, David's busy making slew jokes in my ear.
I've got a mic there.
So the VC market is small. The angel market is even smaller. There's probably 5 angels who've actually worked in tech companies and made enough money to reinvest back in tech companies. And so it is small, but it is also growing. There's a lot more VC funds. We're starting to see more and more exits as we go. And that's attracting bigger VCs coming in. It's creating more of the local angels. And so I definitely think the market is shifting. One of my big things is like the thing that's missing the most is the active participation of the community and events like this, and that's why we started that Lean Startup Coffee on Wednesday mornings. It's on meetup.com, but it was from that thing of when you go to Silicon Valley, if you go to a coffee shop, you can bump into startups and entrepreneurs and techies pretty much anywhere. There's no place like that in Cape Town. We don't have a center, we don't have a hub, we need to create these regular meetups where you can let the organic stuff happen. Like that's the magic of Silicon Valley. It's the network of opportunities. Stuff just happens through serendipity. But you've got to create those intersections. You've got to create those connections, and that's what will drive the market. So when we get a decent deal flow of good entrepreneurs coming out, the VCs will come. We've got a lot of money in the market, but it's conservative because we don't have enough examples of it actually working, and of entrepreneurs really making success, other than a very small sample set. But as those numbers increase, the VC market will come to it as well. But I honestly believe it starts with building the connectedness of the network that helps support and drive and helps better ideas flourish.
Which makes this a smart question because it asked about robust, and robust kind of speaks to that, what makes it anti-fragile. Like if we can build all those networks in and the connections, that's what makes it robust.
Yeah.
Robust doesn't mean solid and stayed. Like we've got a great capital market for investing in property in this country. But we need to like try to make the networks and show the things. And also, I mean, the one thing that's very different from us from Americans are damn loud. If they take funding, everyone knows. Here, it's kind of, we took funding, keep it quiet.
Yeah.
We don't know about the Campey. And just trying to tell these stories and keep it going and letting startups know what's happening. And that's where one of the cool things of Lean Iterator is seeing 10 startups per little booth pitching their idea at other startups, knowing other people are doing the same thing. Hey, he just raised. Oh my gosh, he got 50,000. How did you do that? That's not a raise, but that's getting money. You know, I told the story this way, and someone said they'd fund me. Okay, cool. And then what happened? And then what happened? And then, hey, people are raising. So just getting these stories going, and I think that's a great thing about Silicon Cape, these events, and all of that. Like that stampede effect. Once everybody's doing it, everyone will be doing it. Yeah, so fake it a bit, but there's not too much faking. There's actually a surprising amount of deal flow happening. Just I don't even know the half of it, and people will tell me about a deal, and well, everyone should know about that, and you don't. So. It's interesting.
We need to make more noise. Is there any questions from the audience? Any hands going up? There we go, right here. Sorry, if you could just do it with a microphone, then we can get it on YouTube.
When you guys found a startup, those early stages where you said you spend around $10,000, would you guys finance that, or do the founders have to come with their own financing at that stage?
Yeah. So we're typically not in the finance industry. We don't invest in startups as a rule in general, and mostly down to David's point earlier of like an investor. There are investors that specialize in giving money to early stage startups for that, and if you can't persuade one of them to do it, it doesn't make sense for us who doesn't specialize in that to actually do that.
But that said,
but having said that,
have a leads list where we'll send it out to angels on your behalf if it sounds half decent. We'll help you raise, but also our signals are reinforced by someone else deciding to put money behind it.
Yeah.
So,
to answer your question, we are looking at raising, as G mentioned, putting some money together, a pool of money to help fund the earlier stages, sort of $1,000, $10,000, because the transaction cost on that is just too high for most investors, and the due diligence cost is just working whether they should give you the money or not. So we are looking at ways of correcting that, but yeah, a lot of startups that come to us, if we do want to build them and they don't have the money, we have networks of angel investors and that sort of thing we can send them on to. So very happy to do that and very keen to do that. The question is, what kind of throughput do we have?
Startups. So it depends on the stage. Like Lean Iterator last year engaged with, I think, 60 businesses, 60. I don't have the actual numbers for Afrolabs, but I put it at about 8 to 10 businesses we actively did dev for.
Yeah, we've done 32 in the last 3 years in various stages. Some of those are 2-week projects, and some of them are 18-month engagements of stepping in, stepping out. So it depends on the deal flow. On the Lean Iterator side, we ran about 4-5 programs last year with about 60 entrepreneurs in total running through that. And we're looking at doing probably more than that this year.
Like the guys at Cactus put together programs that we ran through with Orbis, and then there was the Mensch stuff that we ran through. So, it's not self-generated. At UCT, there were programs. So everyone's trying to do it. All we're doing is trying to help each of those people doing it take the next step. And that's the thing. There are lots of people with ideas. Lean Startup Coffee. Come on a Wednesday morning and just hear people pitching that they have an idea, or I've just quit my job to start a startup. It's happening, and we're figuring it out. people will often ask, what are startups worth? Like, there's two layers to that. One is the finance and the investment and the return on investment, and the other is learning to learn as a community. And that's really what it's about, like, for me, is if someone goes through it and fails, at least they've learned what it was about, and they can tell other people, and we can start to build the capacity to learn as flippin' human beings. Because we sit here so terrified that we can't actually learn and try new things, especially when it actually takes some human capital and some financial capital to get it done. So yeah, that's the flow. Like, everyone's trying new ideas. We're just trying to experiment and validate.
Group learning is a really difficult thing to do. Like, how do you learn with knowledge between a group of people? And that's why a startup is a vehicle that can help you do that. And it's easier for you to learn internally, but for you to learn with other people and bring them all up to speed and make sure that the learning is shared, that you can actually group think, and designing better solutions as a team is really difficult to do. And startups are hard. A lot of people think startups are sexy and they're fun, but they're actually really, really hard and a lot of hard work. And that's the bit that's lost. Everyone sees the flashy bit, but that understanding of trying to, as a group, learn, remember that learning, and build on those learnings is the process that's difficult.
What was your biggest failure, Roger?
Probably to date was an adaptive learning platform that we built. We probably spent about 2.5 million rand building out a whole bunch of technology without a proper driver. And so the driver was kind of more interested in group learning and not in adaptive learning technologies. It's really great tech that used like chess ELO ratings to dynamically generate quizzes and revisions and create knowledge profiles. Some really amazing stuff, but without the right driver to actually take it to market, all of that was an absolute waste. And it's not about, we've written off a fairly large number in portfolio, and almost every single time it's because the driver wasn't the right person to actually take the business forward. And we spent too much time building tech, too much money investing in that, without finding the right driver. So kind of answer your question, we don't invest directly in startups. We sometimes discount our rates, take convertible notes, so we do have a bit of a portfolio. Some of them we've been burnt pretty bad before, which is why we're a little more cautious about it now.
And you, David, your biggest failure?
I thought I dodged that one. The thing that comes to the top of my mind, it's a project on which, I spent 2 years of my life on this project. It wasn't a startup, but it's the one that comes to mind. I walked into this project. It was the dream project. It was with a great multinational blue chip. The specs had been written. Everything was fine. I came in as a mid-level developer to do the 3-month push to Christmas to finish it. So that 3-month push, 2 years later, I was the lead developer on the project. I was working 280-hour months. I'd burnt out so badly that, having learned about Agile on the project, introduced Agile, I couldn't get out of bed before about 1 o'clock to get in there. Project went through, we got sign off on version 1.1, like real emotional pain getting this thing done. And there were 2 feature points left on the end that were negotiated, and they said, we'll negotiate that for version 2. And because things fell out and version 2 never got agreed on, all of that work never shipped. It never actually got to be used by the users. And every time I'd go back to check if we could get what the next steps were, the guys from the different parts of the company would be like, oh man, when can we use that system? Our current system sucks. We like this part. We like that part. But because of a little bit of corporate nonsense at the top and shipping in this whole big bang approach, we didn't get to ship. If I'm lucky, those machines that were bought just for the project, and they were bought 2.5 years before we ever deployed, so they depreciated completely by the time we tried to deploy. Maybe those have gone to a school somewhere, and that they're actually delivering some value. But other than that, those years of my life are gone. So that's pretty harrowing.
Thank you. Guys, a question, yeah?
Firstly, a comment, if you are going to do that fundraising, look at Section 12J for your angel investors. It's a good way of leveraging. The real question is, what percentage of your startups end up as scale-ups, and what differentiates a startup that is able to scale relatively quickly from one that just continues to plod along?
So I'll answer your last question first. The difference between a startup that just plods along, for me, isn't a startup, it's a small business. And small businesses are great. They plod along and eventually hopefully become medium-sized businesses. and larger businesses. A startup for me is something that has high growth, something that has high growth potential, something that has the ability to increase in size and revenue, and normally where your revenue can grow exponentially from your costs. So the cost of running it isn't directly tied to your revenue.
So that makes it sound quite simple. They often look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things to look out for is services.
Yeah.
There's a thing, I learned it from, I think, Andrea, this notion of a services trap where, you're doing services because that makes you good money, but you can't actually be working on a scalable product. And as Roger says, like being able to make more money than your costs. So $1 in today makes me 70 cents. Okay. $1 in tomorrow, 1 rand. How old in South Africa? 1 rand in tomorrow makes me a rand. That's cool. And if 1 rand in makes me 1 rand 30, then 1 rand 50, then 1 rand 80, that's great. Otherwise, I'm growing linearly and my profits are growing linearly. I've got a great business. I've been running one of those for 12 years. It's nice. It's rewarding. It's not a startup. Yeah. And I like information logistics and Afrolabs were not startups. We had innovations in our business model, but we weren't seeking a fundamentally new business model.
Yeah, and so just to say what David said in a slightly different light, you want your customer acquisition cost to be greater than your less than your customer lifetime value, or at least have a path to be able to get there. And that CAC to LTV is something that a lot of people miss, and you can typically only raise the funding to cover your burn rate to get you there if you can validate that that's actually going to happen, and to show that the real thing. And if you can't show that huge uptick, like a small business is not attractive to a venture capitalist or an angel, maybe an angel because they're doing it for very different reasons, depending on the angel. But you're not going to get your massive returns on it. The startup, the sexy idea of a startup of big returns, of IPOing, of like a WhatsApp and a Facebook. Those are massively high growth businesses, things that can grow significantly over time. And a lot of businesses, it's just tweaking what was actually there. I mean, Facebook was a yearbook, a digital yearbook, the Facebook with their very first version. And by tweaking and changing and growing, they became something highly scalable and basically redefined an entire category of social networking. And so they're remarkably similar. In one or the other, but it's trying to find a way, how can you make that scalable? How can you track the metrics and show that if you put money in over time, you're going to get a lot more money out?
Yeah. And the secret behind that engine of growth isn't a secret, it's open, but people just don't flip and do it. So the secret is you need to find where the customer's pain is, where that pain is enough that they're willing to actually do something about it. Shameless plug, I'm working on Drone Clouds at the moment, which is a startup that helps farmers with insight. And literally, the time we show a farmer their new insight, he's like, wait, can you speak to a few of my friends? Because I'd like them to have this too. When you've got that kind of value proposition that he hasn't even bought yet, but he wants to tell his friends about it, that is a signal, and we're by no means convinced at this point yet, it's a solid signal that we might have a compounding engine of growth that doesn't need us to actually go and spend money to acquire more customers in that lead generation phase and then through the whole customer acquisition cycle, which could mean that since everything runs in the cloud, that might be a scalable business.
AKA viral loop. So there was one question I saw a little earlier around using SEO and does SEO useful? And those sort of tools and growth hacking and things is very useful in the early stages to the end of validating that the business is worthwhile. How are you using that data to justify that the business model can grow faster than the cost of getting it? And there's lots of tools out there, but using sexy stuff and using SEO when you should actually just be getting out there and talking to your customers is often misleading. So in the beginning, we push people to go very manual until you're at a point where you can start scaling that. You've removed a number of those risks.
Just because all advice isn't consistent on this one. Those things also you hear a hell of a lot about, and they happen at the growth stage of a business. But Steve Blank lays out that we need to start with customer discovery and customer validation. And we can use a good web page, some paid search to start toe dipping and seeing what's happening. And then we pivot quickly with these low-cost experiments from, we thought that was the customer, that wasn't the customer. Once you find it, you go into customer creation, which is the growth stage of a business. That's when you spend on customer acquisition. Yeah. That's when growth hacking happens. And that's when startups start to glitter and, they found the diamond inside. And that's when they're talking and flipping conferences. So they're talking about the stuff that's relevant to them, which is growth hacking. And so everyone thinks growth hacking is startups. And it misses the drudgery of actually the real startup search process.
Yeah, so a quick shout out to Travis from Group Connect. He's here tonight, but He was looking at, they were trying to move a messaging app for people who traveling groups to be able to communicate, but it was really long sales cycle trying to get into big travel operators and that sort of thing. So we sat and he worked out 5 different potential markets that they could move into that might want to use this, each with a slightly different value proposition, created 5 landing pages, spent 1,000 Rand or 500 Rand on Facebook ads and Google ads towards each landing page, tracked what the better conversion was, and then pivoted the entire business to the one that worked. So you can use those tools completely, but use them intentionally. Don't use them just for the sake of using them.
Okay, so we are going over time, but I will allow one question. Anybody? Right, final question.
Can you tell us about what your most successful company exit was? So like not something that's just based on valuations, but that's currently running. So anything that's exited or actually closed into something tangible.
Great question. Do you want to go or shall I?
I'm trying to think.
Okay. So from our point, I mean, I've been kind of jumping around stuff for a while and only been at Playlogix for 3 years. I joined around the time that Gift was moving out and exit, so that we're trying to replicate that, but that was a 7-year project. So it's still kind of early to say on our side. There are a couple of promising ones, but yeah, startups are roller coasters, so it's hard to hedge those bets right now. But yeah, so from our side, I wouldn't say that we definitely haven't banked anything yet, if that's what you're asking.
And I think the insight from there is like we often see startups as a quick thing. I'm just thinking through it. Like, people say it's 10 years to a meaningful exit from a meaningful startup. Our most successful business that we help build is probably Nominini, and they're still continuing to grow, continuing to raise. But outside of the successful exits where you manage to get out before spending too much money, where they are sold for an undisclosed amount, everyone who's succeeding is still succeeding and growing and continuing to take investment. I can't think of anyone right now who's actually sold.
Cool. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your amazing insights.